All right. Hey, everybody. There we go. Thanks for coming to my live today. We are ready to go. Gosh, this is not great lighting for sure. All right. Let's see. Here we go. We are working on Mildred's Resistance, chapters 33 through, I believe, 35. Awesome. And I think we are ready to go. Let me just check what's doing here. Okay, we're ready. Chapter 33. Hold on, I gotta double check something. I thought it was 35. It's actually 33. The book stem is 35 on my DAW. Chapter 33. We Will Be Strong. The succulent smell of spit-roasted quail, duck, and chicken drifted over the buzzing crowd of witches in the high and low baileys. Clusters of apples, pears, and plums nestled in the branches of small evergreen trees decorating the tables. Food lined the buffet tables set up along the 4-story wall that surrounded both baileys. Evelyn observed the crowd below her with a sharp, assessing eye, pleased with the growing numbers. "Here you are, High Priestess," May said. Approaching with the sheer black overlay, Evelyn slipped her arms into the silky fabric, allowing May to cinch it at her waist. An emerald silk gown rustled below the overlay. She'd ordered it at great expense since the Middle Covens hadn't produced as much cotton or silk this year, but she knew that every piece would be worth it. "I'm a High Priestess now," she thought. "I will dress and act like it." May finished setting the overlay, inspected it, and nodded once with unusual warmth. "It looks beautiful, High Priestess. Just beautiful. You picked the perfect dress for your ascension to power." May and Evelyn shared a rare smile. Ever since Evelyn had officially secured her position as High Priestess during the empowerment ceremony, May had glowed with praise and adoration, as delighted as if she herself had achieved the position. Evelyn allowed the praise, but kept careful note of it. Today was her big day, after all, and she wouldn't allow May to take it over the way she did most things. "I've finally done it," Evelyn thought, giddy with relief and excitement. All her years of work had finally paid off. The grief that accompanied Nell's death faded in the afterglow of Evelyn's bright new future. A heavy bracelet dangled from her right hand. Its silver face was etched with ancient words established by Esmelda. Sac ero dos sumus. She reached for the bracelet with her left hand, and her brow furrowed. The empowerment ceremony had brutalized her. Let's see. Okay. I just had to double check a dialogue tag. "The weight of the world sits on your shoulders for a short time," Donovan had said. "So miserable." Miserable. So miserable. It's so miserable. Hi, Sonic. Thanks. "So miserable you can't breathe. Then it fades. It won't actually kill you, but it will feel like it's going to." And so it had. Evelyn was glad it had passed, for she didn't want to relive it again. "Where's Donovan?" Evelyn asked, glancing at a clock on the wall. "He was supposed to be here over 15 minutes ago." "He's on his way," May said, consulting the schedule book she kept with her at all times. "There was a delay in fitting his clothes. He's gained a little more weight, and the tailors had to use a few incantations to fix his robes." "Let him gain all he wants," Evelyn said, tossing her hair and pushing all heavy thoughts from her mind. "He'll drown in his own fat, and I can finally save the network." May's eyes flashed with what appeared to be surprise, though she said nothing. Evelyn never took all the credit for changing the network, but now that she was High Priestess, she would make the decisions, not May. It felt wonderful to liberate herself for a moment. When another 5 minutes passed with no sign of Donovan, Evelyn paced the room, her fists clenched. All her emotions were off-kilter since Nell died. She didn't just feel anymore, she personified. If she felt angry, she trembled. Her occasional depression seemed to swallow her, not have swallowed her. If she felt angry, she trembled. Her occasional depression seemed to swallow her in blankets of heaviest, blackest despair. Even the strength of her elation left her frightened. Always her thoughts returned to Nell, and always she tucked them away. I did what I needed to do for the good of the network. She just wished it hadn't hurt so much. Donovan struggled through the doorway 5 minutes later, dressed in formal robes of crimson with gold stitching. The fat folds of his face wagged around his neck like melting wax. "Let's get this done," he said, scratching at his arms already bright red from previous irritation. "I need a drink, Harold. It's miserable itching all the time. I don't have the energy for speeches." "Later, Your Highness," Harold said, placing a gentle hand on Donovan's shoulder. "At the celebratory dinner, you need to address the network now. They're all waiting." "Merry meet, Donovan," Evelyn called with a wooden smile he'd be too distracted to read into. "It's good to see you." He waved, then waddled past her and onto the balcony. Several protectors wandered through the crowds, disappearing and reappearing at will. Guardians lined the wall and the baileys, actively watching the contentious horde. Witches from all over the network, only the well-to-do, of course, streamed in from Chatham Road. Under Evelyn's strict orders, no one without political office had been allowed in. Donovan fell onto the chair awaiting him at the edge of the balcony. Most of the crowd wouldn't even be able to see his squat frame from where he sat, but Evelyn had never known him to care about those little details. In the direct sunlight, his skin glowed with an unbecoming yellow tint, making him appear sicklier than ever. Melodic chimes from the bell tower silenced the waiting congregation. "Witches of the Central Network," Donovan called, his voice projected over the bailey by an incantation. "Today we gather for a very special event." Evelyn stepped into the shadows behind him, remaining just out of sight, but able to survey the crowd below. Hundreds of witches waited. I'm gonna double check that. They said awaited, it's technically waited. Hey, everybody. Thanks for popping in. Oh, thanks, Sonic. Welcome, Ashley. Okay, let's get back into this. Hundreds of witches waited. Her supporters infused the crowd. Many had promised they'd bring supportive witches with them. A first impression would be crucial to win over those undecided about whether or not she deserved the position. After all, she was quite young to be High Priestess. Donovan caught his breath and wiped at his sweaty forehead with the back of his hand. "And so today, I want to introduce your new High Priestess, Evelyn Ringer." Her stomach leapt. "Here I go," she whispered. "I shall save the world." "Go, Evelyn," May whispered from behind her. "You shall do great things." Evelyn stepped forward with a beaming smile, waving as she glided into position next to Donovan. The ravenous applause, although expected, still surprised her. Once she stepped to the edge of the balcony, the true size of the crowd overwhelmed her. Witches filled both Baileys and the road to Chatham City. She allowed the applause to continue for as long as it would, which felt like hours. "I am honored to be your leader," she said the moment the clapping faded enough for the magic to carry her voice to every ear. Councilmember Gloria let out a piercing whistle, surrounded by faithful coven leaders, who began another round of applause. Grant lounged against the wall, arms tucked under his armpits, a lazy cheroot dangling from his lips as he tracked a hawk flying far above the castle. Evelyn held up her hands and received an instant quiet from her obedient crowd. "How lovely," she thought. "They all obey. First of all, let me thank you for the honor of serving you as High Priestess. To know that all of you love and trust me, as you have since I was a lost orphan wandering these halls, means a great deal." She forced her voice to falter. "I know Nell would be proud to see me here today to take her place. So mote it be." A respectful silence followed. "As High Priestess," she continued, "I make you a solid promise. I will help you bring about a better central network. I guarantee to aid network school education with increased funding. I shall stop the madness. No more violent riots. Riots. No more violent riots. No more violent riots. No more fires. We will be safe. We will be strong." She let the newest round of applause rage, floating in its power like in a sweeping ocean current. Before it showed signs of fading, she called with a passionate cry, "I will do what is best for all the Central Network. Do you trust me?" Another cheer boiled through the crowd for almost 5 minutes. Evelyn let it go, allowing it to infuse her blood and body until it faded, leaving behind a light patter of applause. "In honor of this great occasion," she said, "I have graciously supplied a bounteous luncheon. Let us start our friendship by feasting together." With a grand flourish, Evelyn bowed and backed away from the balcony. Once out of sight, she whirled around and slipped inside the castle. Donovan followed closer on her heels, barking at Harold for a glass of Ipsum. "You've worked hard, Your Highness," May said. Evelyn walked past her without acknowledgement, turning suddenly to address Donovan. Let me handle the ball at Ashley House tonight. You just rest, and I will take care of everything. Don't worry. The network lies in good hands. Donovan's personal retreat, Ashley House, was grand by any standard, but Mildred still didn't care for it. The interior shone in tones of white and cream, highlighting its smooth tiles and sculpted pillars. Perhaps because of her roots in poverty and dirt floors, the sheer amount of marble, though aesthetically pleasing and minimalistic, made her want to roll her eyes. There we go. Hey, Marmee. Made her want to roll her eyes. She snorted at the existence of such a lavish, personal retreat for the high priest. What a waste of currency. Oh, that was Evelyn, not Mildred. There we go. What a waste of currency. There we go. What a waste of currency, she thought, trailing her eyes along the engraved marble pillars near the staircase. Donovan sat off to the side of the main doors in a striped jacket that matched a bluish bruise on the back of his hand. He greeted each witch as they moved inside. Harold was tucked back into a little alcove, holding Donovan's usual decanter and glass. Her Celenda warmed her hand, and while waiting in line, she answered 3 questions about homework, rearranged a class schedule for the next week, and planned a new curriculum in her head. The middle covens had settled down, which meant she would introduce one more class to her secret education initiative, Magic for Gardeners. She'd been teaching herself the incantations and consulting Stefan for weeks now. He'd been only too happy to discuss herbology with her over lunch instead of coven business. Might as well put the useless knowledge on shrubbery to use, she said, earning a cursory glance of disapproval from a nearby witch. The line shuffled forward, and Mildred found herself next to greet. I almost said next to the high priest, but it's actually next to greet the high priest. The line shuffled forward, and Mildred found herself next to greet the high priest. May we meet your highness? She nodded, curtsied, and moved on before he offered his hand to her, as he had to all the others. He blinked as she passed, clearly taken aback by her quick departure, but she didn't care. I tweaked one word, I'm gonna redo it. Hey, big potato. Oh, shoot, I lost my spot. I do it all the time. I look at TikTok and then I lose my spot. Oh, it looks like YouTube's doing okay, too. Hey there, kitty cat and big potato. Naya. Hi, thanks for the follow. You guys are awesome. Let's do books. He blinked as she passed, clearly taken aback by the quick departure, but she didn't care. Mildred followed the movement of the crowd into the ballroom, wishing Stella walked at her side. She missed her comforting presence more than ever. Martin was on a mission and hadn't been around for over a month. With Evelyn's ascent to the role of high priestess, Mildred spent much of her time alone. She'd enjoyed the solitude until now, when she was forced to attend a social function. All the more reason to leave early, Mildred thought to console herself. No one here to stay for once I speak with Evie. She'll be busy. An army of witches paraded around Eleven's celebratory ball in a great ball of silk, chiffon, and tulle. Butlers drifted by with silver platters of champagne, their steps so measured that the liquid didn't even shift. 3 sprawling crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, throwing light in prisms on the walls. Shrubs sculpted into hearts and decorated with pale pink summer flowers littered the room. Mildred smirked. She knew the incantation that had made those shrubs. Goodness, she said, standing near the entrance, which was lined with gold filigree. Likely she could have paid 3 months of coven taxes with the cost of this ball alone. Oh, the difference she could make in the middle covens with this kind of currency. Maybe that's just what our taxes went to. Okay. Oh, hey, Uriel. Thanks for coming in. Maybe that's just what. I keep mixing up over the just. With this kind of currency. Maybe that's just what our taxes went to, she murmured, staring at an ice sculpture on the other side of the room. A swan with a delicate arched neck poised mid-flight, wings spread, water rushing up to meet its departing feet. The statue gleamed with frosty blue, silver, and white. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen, but no doubt cost as much as most witches made in their lifetimes. Isn't it wonderful? A passing witch asked, fanning herself. A new high priestess, and one so young. Then again, Mildred reasoned, they were celebrating a new high priestess, her best friend. The rarity of the occasion meant Evelyn would have demanded it be all the grander. An open window admitted a breeze that stirred stirred the hot summer air. Thanks for hanging out, you guys. Hey, Sonic. An open window admitted a breeze that stirred the hot summer air. Mildred placed herself in front of it to keep from sweating. Her plain, buttery yellow dress almost looked severe in comparison when she stood near the other assistants, like Jane. Mildred brushed the thought aside. At least it was comfortable, and that counted for far more than fashion. A familiar head of red hair, pulled into an elegant updo, appeared with a bright, though somewhat perhaps forced, smile. "Here you are, Mildred," Evelyn said. "I'm glad you showed up. I didn't think you'd come." "Not come? You really think I'd miss your celebration tonight?" Evelyn shrugged with false modesty. "One can never tell." Mildred studied her oddly subdued friend with tapered eyes. Evelyn seemed so distant. Why had she called her Mildred? Evelyn always called her Millie. Mildred wondered if Evelyn felt embarrassed to be seen talking to a lowly assistant. Despite the detailed tatting and full skirt of her emerald gown, Evelyn wasn't strikingly beautiful like Stella. Her passion and social grace gave her a dangerous, quick kind of attraction, like looking at something sparkly. When one glanced at it too often or for too long, the luster faded. Even as High Priestess, Evelyn seemed no different. "Congratulations, Evie," Mildred managed to say. "Your speech impressed us all. You did beautifully, just as I knew you would." "Yes," Evelyn said, waving to another witch over Mildred's head. "It was a perfect speech, wasn't it? May wanted to write it for me, but I wouldn't let her near it. I think I did just fine without her, don't you?" Both their gazes drifted to the other side of the ballroom, where May spoke with Councilmember Grant. She wore a plumed black dress that matched her hair, and a striking red sash looped around her slender waist. "I think you did very well without her." Evelyn's glittering eyes seemed to laugh. "I did." Mildred had never understood May, nor Evelyn's rampant devotion to her. Stella had once admitted that she thought May brilliantly smart, but a bit frightening. The rest of the network, however, regarded May as an oddity, with her pale skin, jet black hair, and aloof gaze. Rumors swirled that May had kicked her daughter, Angelina, out of her house when she came home pregnant. No one could confirm it, and May never spoke of it. When anyone tried to ask, she placed a hex on the witch who broached the subject. It rarely came up twice. Mildred brushed the thoughts aside. She had more important things to think about than a strange assistant with sharp eyes and a pretty face. "You presented your message very well," Mildred said, tearing her eyes away from Evelyn's mentor. "May can't take credit for that." "No?" Evelyn agreed. "I suppose not. Don't you just love these decorations? They cost quite a bit, but I just couldn't help myself. I deserve to be celebrated after attaining High Priestess at such a young age. Wouldn't you agree?" Her eyes bore through Mildred with a sudden intensity that nearly took Mildred's breath away. "Yes, I suppose so," Mildred said, and Evelyn relaxed. "I do deserve to be celebrated," she murmured before taking a sip of champagne. "For I've given up much to earn this position. I have sacrificed, not May." Mildred formed no reply, not understanding the sudden current of tension in Evelyn's voice, but her friend continued speaking without interruption, not having expected a response in the first place. I mm, I started as Mildred, and that's Evelyn. Not having expected a response in the first place. "I invited all the coven leaders from the Ashley covens, Chatham City, and a few of the other influential witches," Evelyn said, setting her empty flute on the tray of a passing butler. To Mildred's relief, she didn't take another. Evelyn wasn't drunk yet, but it wouldn't be long at this rate. "Why not invite all the coven leaders?" Mildred asked, glancing around with new eyes. It would have been nice to see people she knew, though she couldn't picture half of her coven leaders in so lavish an environment. "None of them." Not all of them, not none of them. Hey, everybody. Hey, Jose. Hey, Sabrina. Oh, hey, Drywall Master. Thanks for coming. What? I just deleted that on accident. Here we go. Let's restart this. "Not all of them would know proper etiquette," Evelyn said, regarding Mildred with disbelief. "You're serious, aren't you? But how can you be? Mildred, think of it. Can you imagine some of your coven leaders at a gala such as this? They'd make fools of themselves." Mildred didn't respond, but not for lack of an opinion. She wanted to say plenty about Evelyn's elitist attitudes and questionable friends, but she bit her tongue. Evelyn certainly had a point, loath as Mildred was to admit it. She tried picturing Bart, a great oaf of a witch with holy clothes and matted hair, at the ball. She just couldn't see it ending well. "It's just as May says," Evelyn continued. "Better to spare the poor the cost and embarrassment of such an extravagant party. I'll send them all gift baskets or something. Besides, this is a ball. A ball has standards that I must ensure are met. I am High Priestess now." "Standards, right. That's why I didn't invite Stella, you know," Evelyn said as an afterthought, plucking a fresh glass of champagne off the tray of a passing waiter. Her voice held a hint of wistfulness. I wanna re-listen to that wistfulness. I said it kinda funny. Yeah, I'm a little dramatic at wistfulness. I'm gonna redo it so it doesn't take the listener out of the story. Her voice held a hint of wistfulness. Mildred reared back. "What? Standards, Mildred?" I'm gonna redo that. I have, like, an extra lisp on the end of Mildred there. "Standards, Mildred," Evelyn repeated, as if she were teaching a belligerent child. "She's not part of the political world anymore, is she? She's wiping snot and changing diapers at home. How could I justify bringing her here when she has no place in the political world?" Mildred's heart beat painfully in her throat. Stella had no place? Did Evelyn even realize what she was saying? "Stella's your best friend," Mildred hissed. "Doesn't that count?" Evelyn smiled, appearing unruffled by Mildred's scowl, but her green eyes cooled. "This is politics, Mildred. It's not personal. You of all witches must understand that." "Even politicians have friends, Evie. You have them in loads. They're all dreadful, arrogant elitists." "Yes, but they're from the same caste as me, the same mold. All of my friends exert political influence, all except for Stella. She chose her path and is now nothing more than a mother and a guardian's wife. When I want to go to tea and giggle about the past with a friend." I'm gonna do that, redo that. Evelyn speaks quickly, but that tumbled over itself, so I like to redo it. "When I want to go to tea and giggle about the past with a friend, of course I'll choose Stella. But I couldn't bring her here with these witches." She gestured to the ballroom, and Mildred saw only a collection of elitists that shared the same philosophy. The only place for the poor was right under their heel. "Friends indeed," Mildred retorted, feeling sick to her stomach. She'd prepared herself for gloating in Evelyn's usual high-handed remarks, but she hadn't anticipated Evelyn turning her elitist back on Stella. "They'd hang you and take your spot the first moment they had the chance, Evie. Stella and I are your true friends. We're the ones that really care and always have." "I know," Evelyn admitted with a smile that reminded Mildred of her 6-year-old friend. "It's true. You are still my best friend. But I can't make exceptions for Stella in this sphere, can I? I'm allowing you to call me by my first name because we're close." Um, this character, Evelyn, is awful. "I'm allowing you to call me by my first name because we're as close to political equals as we'll ever be, since you'll never attain more than I while I'm alive. Stella, on the other hand, must call me High Priestess. Justice cannot be superseded by childhood friendship. I'm simply doing what's best for the network." "You're wrong," Mildred said. "Stella can be your friend no matter what influence she does or does not have. You're the High Priestess now, Evie. You're in the business of witches, not standards and tradition." "Mercy and witches can't outweigh justice and tradition, or all would be chaos. I'm here to bring justice to a network that lacks it. Why else are we falling apart?" Mildred hesitated, with no way to get out the words in her throat. I don't like the way I said that. That cadence was kinda weird with "get out the words." Redo it. With no way to get out the words in her throat. She felt shaken and startled and even a little frightened. She didn't know this Evelyn. "I feel like your new power is going to your head," she concluded with chilling disapproval. "Is it?" Evelyn asks this archly, so I want to change my tone to be a little bit sharper. "Is it?" Evelyn asked archly. "Or are you jealous of my success as High Priestess?" "Evelyn!" "Well, what else am I to think? You're acting like a child. May warned me this would happen, you know. She told me years ago that you, of all the witches here, would get jealous." Mildred's mind locked up. I wanna re-listen to that. Yeah, there's not a lot of separation between Mildred and mind, so I'm gonna redo Mildred's mind. Would get jealous. Mildred's mind locked up. She couldn't think of anything beyond the sudden fear that Evelyn was right. What if she was jealous? Had Mildred let her emotions get away from her? She took a deep breath and forced herself to think logically. Her mind retreated from its panic. She wasn't feeling jealousy, she knew that right away. No, Mildred didn't want to be High Priestess, not anymore. All she wanted was a small cottage and a life with Martin. But she did feel fear. Fear for her best friend, for her network. Fear that one day soon she'd have to fulfill her promise to her students and support them against a writing elitist doctrine. Against her best friend. Mildred folded her hands in front of her, grateful that the ball moved on around them, oblivious to the sudden rift that stood between them like a chasm. "I'm not jealous, Evie," she said. "Well, it's no secret that you and I don't agree on much. What I'm feeling is concern for you, that's all. The position of High Priestess came unexpectedly to a witch so young." Evelyn's neck loosened, then her shoulders, her face, and finally the tight rage in her eyes. It flickered into something that looked like guilt, then longing, and settled into a distant indifference. "I can handle it." "I know," Mildred said, hoping to reach the 6-year-old Evelyn buried somewhere in all the layers of pain and sadness. "That's why I tell you how I really feel. You're one of the strongest witches I know." Despite her reservations, Mildred felt a wild sense of pride for Evelyn. She'd done what Mildred couldn't have, become High Priestess. "Thank you, Millie." Evelyn's eyes clung to Mildred for just long enough to seem hopelessly lost, perhaps a bit frightened. When she looked away, tears lingered in her emerald eyes. Mildred swallowed. "Enjoy your party," she said, clearing her gravelly voice. "Everyone is here to celebrate you, High Priestess, as they should. You've accomplished something grand." Evelyn nodded, and all traces of previous vulnerability faded. "Mary Part's assistant, Mildred." Mildred watched her go, uncertain why she felt like mourning, and not sure she wanted to know what it meant. Boom, bam, baby. Okay. That was a really big chapter in this story. It's a really fun one. I love Evelyn and Millie together. I think it's really fun. So we're going to go right in. That was chapter 33 in Mildred's Resistance, which is the audiobook that I'm narrating right now. I wrote it years ago, and I am re-narrating it. So all of my audiobooks are in my voice. So we're going to chapter 34, and we're over the halfway mark too. This one is called Riot, and it's as long as that one. So I think I'll have just enough time to do this one more chapter in my hour long. Who's here? Hey, Pauline, thanks for coming in. Hey, Shauna and Kato and Sammy. So fun to see all you guys. So cool. Thanks for being here. All right, let's go to chapter 34. Chapter 34, Riot. A volley of letters flew at Mildred like a cloud of darts the moment she entered Stefan's office a week later, nearly knocking her on her backside. She paralyzed them in midair. "Goodness, what was that for?" she asked. Stefan stood near the fire in his usual disarray, one hand in his pocket, the tails of his shirt untucked and one suspender dangling by his elbow. His wrinkled brow fell low over his eyes like sagging snow clouds. "Where have you been?" he snapped. "I've been waiting all afternoon. Letters are pouring in like birds, and I can't get a moment's rest. Get rid of them. I haven't even taken my afternoon tea yet." Mildred's eyes flickered to the clock. So many letters at such a quiet hour of the day meant something sour was afoot. "Did you eat, Stefan?" she asked, plucking the envelopes from the air one by one and sending him a reproachful look. "You always become surly when you're hungry." "No," he said. "It's none of your business if I've eaten or not. Now do your job." Mildred studied him with shrewd eyes but said nothing. He rarely acted on his anger with such strength anymore. Striving for extra patience, she sent an order to the kitchens for his dinner, set his book by the footrest, and Sorry, that last is a little bit funny. I'm gonna redo it. She sent an order to the kitchens for his dinner, set his book by the footrest, and placed a blanket within reach. He continued to glower at the flames, lost in thought. The first message undid itself the moment she touched the seal. Okay, this is from William. I have voiced William before, so I'm just gonna listen to. "I've worked with Carthage before." Okay, he has a pretty benign voice. I've voiced him before, so I create little tags so I can go back and find the characters and keep everything really consistent. "We need you in Stilton Coven immediately. William." She opened several of the others. Most were from High Witches in Stilton, though one came from Hampstead and another from Tilton. Mildred stood, wearing a fresh coat of stress, and shoved all the letters into her bag. "I'm going to Stilton Coven," she declared, transporting away without another word. "What is it, William?" Mildred asked the moment she appeared in his office amid a cacophony of screams and guttural bellows from outside. She whipped around to find a window and saw a sea of witches on the lawn. That transition was a little awkward. Oh, it's okay. Sometimes things are just awkward in my head, but they're not actually awkward on the audio, so I always check. Blessed be. William stopped pacing in front of the fire and followed her gaze. Sweat beaded on his hairline, despite the threat of rain from low-hanging clouds. They've been out there for an hour. Oh, I added an extra word. I try to keep it spot on so my proofers don't have to report it. They've been out there an hour. Several tried to break in with torches and oil, but two guardians who are here visiting family came to help. They've kept the mob out so far. I see, Mildred said, her lips pressed into a thin line. One guardian stood in front of the main door to the office, while another projected the back. Protected, not projected. Mildred said, lips pressed into a thin line. One guardian stood in front of the main door to the office, while another protected the back. When a witch tried to elbow his way through the crowd and onto the porch, he hit a protective wall and flew backward. Torches littered the ring of people, who all wanted a chance to destroy the office. Have the guardians sent for reinforcements? She asked. Twice, but no word. Mildred used the Selenda to send a message to Martin, grateful that she'd welcomed him into the Selenda months before when he started teaching a course on defensive magic to a few guardian hopefuls amongst the servants. He'd respond immediately, no doubt. Okay. I had to figure out the dialogue. They're angry about the new toll on the Central Highway, William said. A mob attacked two of the tax collectors early this morning when they tried to enforce the toll. Stilton residents can't pay their normal taxes because it all goes into the transportation of goods now. They simply don't have the currency. Lily is upstairs taking care of the tax collectors, but it doesn't look good for either. She expects both to die. Is your daughter Hazel safe? William hesitated with an expression on his face that clearly said, Is anyone safe? Then nodded. She's helping her mother. An ear-splitting boom broke the air, rattling the cups on the table. The windows shuddered. The guardian's shield held, but wouldn't last forever. Mildred strengthened it with a spell of her own, and the yells from outside seemed to quiet a degree. Where is the majority of the violence? She asked. William gestured to a yellowing map on the desk. The dots reflect areas with reports of discontent. Mildred studied the collection of dots on the map to find that the violence wasn't focused in a single area, but spread out. P's and T's are always my hardest. But spread out through the Stilton... there was no the. I add words too. Focused on a single area, but spread out through Stilton Coven. She'd been naive not to give more attention to the Covens after the announcement of the new toll, but in the pandemonium after Nell's death, she hadn't found time. A traitorous flicker of doubt flashed through her mind in Evelyn's voice. The poor want to be led. Nay, they need to be led. The riots in Newbury are evidence enough of that. When they don't understand or get what they want, they turn to fire and violence. Surely all of these witches couldn't be naturally violent. Scared, perhaps, but not violent. Mildred focused on the gnawing sense in her belly that told her the root of this problem lay in ignorance and fear, not bloodlust. How much tax for this month have you collected? She asked. Less than half of what's due. It felt like an icicle driving into her ribs. If the other covens had amassed similar. Thanks, Skylar. If the other covens had amassed similar... Oh my gosh, why can I not say similar? If the other covens had amassed similar levels of currency... Okay. If the other covens had amassed similar levels of currency, which she imagined was likely, she wouldn't even pull in half. Mildred ran her thoughts through a sieve, trying to catch what little tidbits of logic she could find. Sliding back into not paying a full tax would shatter her pride, not to mention anger Donovan, and maybe even Evelyn. A full-blown riot would only cement Evelyn's horrid opinions. Well, that won't work at all, she said, pushing aside all feelings of panic to focus on the next step. Do you have any ideas? William asked. Dolph, the head of Guardians, appeared a few paces away with a quiet whisper. Martin sent me. I don't think we've voiced Dolph before, and that voice I just did was a little too close to William. They're going to be they're going to be close to each other in conversation here, so I need to think of a different variation. So I'm going to try the same line a couple different ways, so you can see how I figure out. How I figure out new characters. Okay. So William's going to say, "Do you have any ideas?" And then Dolph say, Martin sent Martin sent me. We can do rougher. Martin sent me. Or we can do it faster. Or we can do a we he could have a Chatham City accent. It could be, Martin sent me, and elongate a little bit more like, Martin sent me a riot. And then he'll go, I'm trying to find some other lines to try it out. Um, talk to them. They'll kill you. Okay. I think we're gonna give Dolph just an elongated Chatham City accent and just see how this segment goes. Martin sent me, he said. Dolph, a wiry, thin witch with unassuming hazel eyes, stood just a little taller than Mildred. I just have to close this little thing really quick. Okay. Let's see how this goes. Steve, what's up? One could be sure. Oh, I don't like that. Okay. With unassuming hazel eyes, stood just a little taller than Mildred. One could be sure, just by looking at him, that he understood whatever moved around him. He looked out the front and back windows and over to Mildred. A riot? Almost. They've nearly killed 2 tax collectors, and we only have 2 guardians keeping them from setting us on fire. Dolph nodded once to William and marched to the back door, disappearing outside without another word. We must do something, William said. Mildred met his gaze. I'm going to talk to them. Talk to them. His eyes bugged out. They'll kill you, I won't give them the chance. Nope, that sounded wrong. There's a little too much of a accent to it. I won't give them the chance. In the meantime, I have a task for you. He paused, disoriented by her fast switch of topics. What? Go to the kitchens in Chatham Castle and tell the head cook, Mrs. F., that I want as much food as she'll part with. Scraps even. She pulled a velvet bag drawn shut by strings from her pocket and set it in his palm. Tell her I'll pay her from my own personal currency if she wishes, although I don't think she will. I want to feed this mob. Now? He asked in disbelief. She nodded. Now. But do it. He tried to argue, but she ignored him. Once he left, she took advantage of the silence to reorganize her thoughts. One thing she knew for certain, Stilton Coven could not riot. If they lost control of their strongest coven, the others would fail too, taking her and the entire middle covens down with them. Dolph strode back into the room. What's your plan? He asked. Okay, so that's my second time voicing Dolph, and remember we just established his accent, so I'm going to re-listen and make sure. Yeah, I just make sure it's consistent in that second voicing of it. Um, make sure it's steady. I want to talk to them, she said, meeting his gaze. Think you can make that happen without them killing me? I can put a bubble around you. It'll lift you over them and protect you from projectiles. I don't like that. Let me re-listen to that. Yeah, I have like a really I like hesitate around there. Hey Steve, what's up? You guys are awesome. All right, let me redo that because I didn't like that line. All around you. It'll lift you over them and protect you from projectiles, he said. Mildred shook her head. I want them to see me, but I don't want to stand high above them as if I'm better than them. I'll talk with them, one-on-one, the way a leader should. If my assumption is right, they're frightened and want answers. Dolph studied her for a long pause. Are you sure? It'll be dangerous. Not as dangerous as a full riot. Do what you need to, and I'll make sure no harm comes to you, he said. A contingent of guardians wearing civilian clothes over their armor is transporting here. They have orders to quietly infiltrate the mob. I'll give you 3 minutes to calm the crowd. If not, my guardians act. 10, she said. I think I can reach them. 5. He glanced outside, then back at her. They're ready to kill Mildred. I won't give them the opportunity. Agreed, Mildred said, pulling in a deep breath. 5 minutes. Mildred stepped onto the porch with only one thought on her mind. I must not fail this time. The moment she appeared, the jeers of the crowd grew hysterical. She let them scream and chant, their faces disfigured by rage and desperation. The fear in their eyes reminded her of the dire poverty she'd experienced growing up. They're frightened, she thought. That's all. One witch threw a tomato, but Dolph deflected it with an incantation, and it flew over the rooftop. Another threw a heavy brick, but it crumbled into sand. Mildred used a spell to extinguish their torches, which only doubled the fervor. She transformed the buckets of oil into water just in case. She stood in the same spot for 3 full minutes, Dolph at her side, waiting for them to vent their aggression. Remembering from her first visit to Stilton that the people recognized her authority when she believed she had it, she squared her shoulders and drew in a deep breath. "Silence!" she commanded, projecting her voice with an incantation. The crowd raged on, lobbing bricks, nails, balls of mud, and whatever else they could get their hands on. All of the projectiles splattered against Dolph's. Telling you, it's always T's and D's. All of the projectiles splattered against Dolph's invisible wall and disintegrated. "1 minute," Dolph muttered under his breath. Mildred's nostrils flared. She wasn't sure she had the power to use a silencing incantation on such a massive crowd, but she had to try. Using silent magic to cast the spell, she wobbled on her feet. The spell required so much magic that, for a moment, she felt dizzy. Seconds later, the frantic screams fell to whispers. Witches grabbed their throats, looking at each other and speaking in hushed conversation. It should have silenced them completely, but she took the whispers as success. "Better," she said, her voice rising. "If you want to speak, you'll have to earn the privilege. I will not tolerate such blatant insubordination and violence. You have concerns, I understand, but you shall not act like children if you want me to help you." Several witches still tried to scream, but she felt gratified that most of them had settled, their narrow, suspicious eyes focused on her. "I shall not fail," she thought. "Most of you already know that my name is Mildred," she said. "I am the assistant to Councilmember Stefan. I'm here to listen to your concerns. Before we begin, I want to make one thing clear. If you continue to use violence, I will take appropriate action. A contingent of guardians awaits my command. Should you choose to act in a civilized manner, we will proceed to hear you out. If not, the guardians will take control, and all of you will find yourselves in the dungeons at Chatham Castle." A new layer of stillness settled over the crowd. Hopefully, she had reached them before their collective fervor reached the frenzied height that had prevented rational. I'm going to redo that. I like that cadence. I also inserted a word. Sometimes when I read, I just throw words in. Hopefully, she had reached them before their collective fervor reached the frenzied height that prevented rational thought. "I'll remove the silencing incantation from each individual witch who raises a hand to voice their concerns with me in a civilized manner. You may begin." A wall of silence hung around them for a full minute before one hand rose in the back. Mildred motioned to it with a nod and issued a single-person spell reversal. Such intricate, complicated incantations would drain most of her energy if this continued for long. "I have no currency left for taxes," a scruffy male called, his voice cracking. "The cotton crop was poor this summer, which means we have hardly enough to pay the new tolls." "Raise your hands if you're here about the same thing," Mildred called, feeling a quiver in her belly when every arm rose. She loosened the incantation from a witch near the edge of the crowd. "We can't afford to feed our children under these taxes," he called in a thick brogue. "We can't even bring food from the northern Coven's orchards because of the fallen bridge." "How long has it been down?" she asked. I want to listen to that. Sometimes, oh, it's okay. Sometimes I say that my accents get leaky and they kind of slide over. That's fine. She asked, her forehead furrowing into deep lines. "No one reported a fallen bridge to me." "2 months? The network hasn't sent their crews yet. It's in Ashley Covens, though barely. A new council member for Ashley hasn't done anything about it." Mildred summoned a quill and scroll from the office. They zipped through the open window, settling next to her to record every complaint. To her surprise, the silencing spell continued at full strength without falter. Her powers must have strengthened more than she knew. "I've noted that the bridge needs repair," Mildred said, ensuring the quill noted her thoughts appropriately. "What else?" So it went for the next 30 minutes. Mildred heard every witch that wanted to speak, despite the similarity of the complaints, which centered on taxes, a fear for winter, and an inability to pay the toll on the central highway. A collective lull eventually settled over the group. "Is that all?" she asked. When no hand rose, Mildred let out a sigh of relief. Her scroll had unraveled in a mass of ink and paper. The quill moved at a frantic speed. William had appeared in the back, surrounded by a slew of servants from the castle bearing armfuls of food. They set it all out on a table, transporting in and out at random. Mrs. F. had come through for her. "Very well," Mildred said, gratified to still feel strength despite the toll the silencing spell had taken on her. "I hear you, all of you." I hesitated too long, and it made it sound funny. All of you. You have legitimate worries for your families and your future. I also understand how high the taxes are. If you do not have the means to pay in currency, I am willing to negotiate. If possible, their suspicions only deepened. Mildred didn't blame them. For the first time in her life, she spoke without a plan. How could she negotiate? She didn't have the authority to tell them they didn't have to pay taxes. Donovan would put her head on a platter. Then how will you collect your precious currency? A woman hissed, clutching her child to her chest. I am meeting with all the coven leaders early in the morning to work out a solution. I will send that plan out to the middle covens through the tax collectors tomorrow evening. Guardians will accompany them. If you attempt to harm any of them, you will be placed in the dungeons, where I will personally visit you once a year for the rest of your life. And the bridge? It will also be taken care of. Tomorrow evening, if you can handle congregating in a non-violent fashion, you may come back to the coven office and I'll explain my new plan. In the meantime, I have provided a meal for you before you go home. You will find food sufficient for your needs on the tables behind you. If there are leftovers, take them home. Go well. She removed the spell suppressing their voices, spun around, and strode inside the office without another word. Dolph stepped to the middle of the porch, his eyes scanning the crowd. Several guardians transported next to him and near to the table where William oversaw the distribution of food. Once inside, Mildred leaned back against the door and closed her eyes. It's over, she thought. She'd done what she needed to do and curbed a full riot. All right. This character's coming up named Lily. And again, I voiced her just once. Okay. So I just want to double check her voice because I couldn't remember it. And consistency is super important to the listening experience. You did wonderfully, Miss Mildred, Lily said from where she sat on the staircase, her pale her pale face. I'm just going to do that whole part. You did wonderfully, Miss Mildred, Lily said from where she sat on the staircase, her pale face drawn with fatigue. Her daughter Hazel, a wide-eyed, black-haired young woman, a near replica of her mother, sat at her side. Truly. Okay, I have to stop because anyone that's read my books in the network series, like Miss Mabel's School for Girls or any of those, will recognize Hazel as Bianca's grandma. So if any of you are familiar with the network series, as you listen to this, this is a fun little Easter egg surprise appearance from a teenage Hazel, which is just really, really fun. Are the tax collectors going to make it? Mildred asked. Lily shook her head. No, she whispered. One just died. This is far from over, Mildred said. They won't be the first to die if we don't get it under control somehow. They seem calm now, at least, Lily said, glancing out at the chattering crowd. Guardians stood at intervals along the edges, their swords glimmering in the torchlight. For tonight, Mildred replied. I'll tell William. No, tell William. Not I'll tell William. Whoa. There we go. Tell William I'll return early in the morning with the other coven leaders. We'll meet all day. She transported back to her bedroom, falling into an exhausted heap on her bed. She composed a hasty letter to the coven leaders and sent a message of thanks to Martin through the Celenda, promising to see him the next day, then peeled off her clothes, scrubbed her body, and fell into bed. By the time the sun rose, Mildred had already awoken, eaten a small breakfast packed by Mrs. F., spoken with Martin, not spoke with Martin. Mildred had already eaten a small breakfast packed by Mrs. F., spoken with Martin, transported to Stilton, and begun dealing with the list of issues. Stefan showed up around lunch and, after being doted on by Lily and Hazel, decided to stay for the duration of the meeting. Mildred conducted the 6-hour meeting with the supreme efficiency of a trained captain of the guards. By late afternoon, she sent an announcement with each coven leader, signed by Stefan no less, to duplicate and spread to every village and town. Do you think it'll work? Mildred asked William, staring out the window at the slow bustle. I'm going to redo that. The SL slurred, and I don't like that. Mildred asked William, staring out the window at the slow bustle of downtown Stilton. Several witches had gathered to hear her plan already. He suppressed a yawn. It has to, he said. Donovan would be furious if he found out I'm allowing witches to rebuild the bridge and perform other jobs for the coven in lieu of paying taxes, she said, speaking more to herself than to him. Although I doubt he will find out, as he doesn't pay much attention to anything besides hunting. We'll save some currency by not paying for repairs. and the wealthier witches will still pay their pentacles or pay in food, which we'll put in the storehouses for desperate moments during the winter. But I still don't know that we'll pull in enough currency to keep me in this job. He's already tried to fire me once. If you Oh, it's Stefan. She was talking to William, but then Stefan butts in. Characters. If you dip below 30,000 pentacles once or twice, Donovan won't fire you right away, Stefan said from where he sat at the fire, plucking dried grapes off a tray Hazel brought him. His aged forehead crinkled. At least I don't think he will. If you just pay Norbert off, Donovan wouldn't even know that you're low. I won't pay into corruption, she said, folding her arms across her chest with a sigh and hoping that Stefan was right. All right. Woohoo! 8 minutes to spare, and I finished the 2 chapters for today. I have a meeting at 11, or else I would stay. Oh, Steve, let's check out all your questions. You guys, Steve Campbell is on here, and he's like an narrator extraordinaire. Do you concern yourself with using the same voice for different characters from different series? For sure. So a bunch of my characters span series. So 2 of my characters, Sana and Isadora, they go from the Dragon Master trilogy to the Sister Witches to the Network series, and then a bunch of short stories. Their voice is consistent. I just age them. So when they're younger, the voice sounds a little lighter and brighter, and when they're older, it has some more of like a creaky slant. And then do I edit my books if I find errors when narrating? 100%. Sometimes you'll see me stop or, like, look funny and not explain. It's because I probably found something highlight or, italicized it shouldn't be or a missing period. There's not a lot of mistakes in these older books that I'm re-narrating because 'cause they've been through so much editing. But when I'm editing or narrating a first like, a book it's the first narration and it just went through edits, and it still going through proofing, I find a lot, and I have to stop for that. The errors that I find, I don't find many, like, maybe throughout the book, like 10 through a, like, 100,000 word book, but sometimes they do surprise me. They're like, "How did that one happen?" Or, like, um, sometimes my audio proofers find entire sentences are missing. Like, like, I know I recorded it, but I probably accidentally deleted it somehow or something, so I don't know, narrating gets really super interesting. Thank you all for coming. It's so cool to see all of you here. I appreciate you being here and all of your